The Ehlers Danlos Society just had their conference and I saw that they posted Dallas cheerleaders, so I was wondering why. I went to the comments and you can pause to read. Before I continue, I want to make it very clear that having hypermobility doesn't automatically mean that someone has Ehlers Danlos. Being hypermobile is quite common. And so many of us keep trying to put this information out there to please not automatically assume that someone has Ehlers Danlos just because they are hypermobile. To continue, I have been seeing a lot of conversation around this and a lot of criticism because people feel like they should have had people who actually have Ehlers Danlos on stage, whether it be dance or some other sort of sport, or even talk about people who could do sports or previously who can't anymore because of Ehlers Danlos or common comorbidities, or even people who never were able to in the first place. So now I will share my own experience with that. I used to be able to figure skate and I did it on and off, but I struggled because of Ehlers Danlos and spina bifida. I really had a hard time with ankle stability and it took a long time to be able to get to my outside edge. I had the easiest time with my inside edge. I also had to be careful because I wasn't always able to work on spins because I would get motion sick really easily. A lot of people say if you do it long enough, the motion sickness will go away, or if you start young, you won't deal with that. It just got worse. It didn't go away. In 2019, I had to stop figure skating and I have not skated since, but I really, really miss it. I was hoping maybe this year I could get back on the ice at least once just for fun. But you will see later in the video as to why it's not looking so good. On to the next thing, which is dance, which I have been doing for the majority of my life, and I have been struggling the entire time because of my health. The first year or two, I remember getting foot cramps every single class. And the way my Ehlers Danlos affects me, which isn't commonly talked about, is I'm not flexible naturally. I have hypermobile joints and I have stiff muscles, which has been explained as that's essentially my body trying to protect itself. The spina bifida, of course, also caused issues, and I was only allowed to do the exam with the Royal Academy of Dance 1 year because my teacher said I wouldn't pass if I did it any other year due to my chronic health issues, and she tried to see if she could apply for some sort of disability accommodations, but they only offered that for blind and deaf dancers, and that was it. At the age of 10, my ballet teacher told me I would never make it on the point and that I would never make it as a dancer, especially in ballet, and that if I wanted to dance at all, I should just switch to lyrical, which I did do lyrical on and off, but I also had a really hard time with that, with the flexibility and stability, and I also really injured my elbow one day in class, and yeah, that's a whole thing. Ballet was actually the whole reason why I was able to figure out that something was up, because my regular teachers in class would just brush off my health issues as me trying to get out of class, including difficulty breathing, heart palpitations, a lot of like wrist pain and hand pain that I would get and stuff like that. I do want to really emphasize how lucky I was with the studio that I grew up with, even though I was told some not so very nice things, including things I'm not mentioning in this video because it's irrelevant. But I was not pushed to a point where I was getting injured or having lifelong problems. Ballet actually helped me in the long run, which everyone with Ehlers Danlos is different. This is just me. My studio focused on being able to dance for a long time into adulthood and wanted people to be able to have a career potentially in dance and focused on injury prevention. A lot of studios don't do that, and that's where things go wrong because there's so many people, even without Ehlers Danlos, who can't dance anymore as an adult or they struggle to. And I know people who have had to get surgery from different dance studios, even in my area, because of the training that they were put through. Now, I was eventually able to do point starting in 2018, which is pretty late because I was already, like 18, 19 years old when I started. And I had such a hard time for so many different reasons again, but my feet, my toes would keep popping in and out of place. And again, with the turnout and ankle stability, the figure skating did help with the ankle stability, though, I will say. Unfortunately, though, I had to stop point in 2019, and there are a couple times where I have worn my point shoes since then, but I wasn't actually able to dance in them. Long story short, I thought that I broke my toes from doing point from wearing shoes that were too big, which were professionally fitted, but they were definitely too big. I have feet that shrink and like are compressible, which is probably related to the Ehlers Danlos when I go up onto point, which made it really difficult to fit. And I was misdiagnosed with broken toes by the podiatrist. I found out years later that they were not broken and that he just told me they were, but the x-ray didn't actually show they were broken, so that's great. My joints were just super messed up. I wasn't able to properly rest because at that point in time I was just asked to be the dance soloist for a musical, which I said yes. I was still able to dance after that, just not point. And physical therapy has both hurt and helped me. One physical therapist I worked with actually told me to quit dance even though I got injured during his physical therapy. Unfortunately, if you work with a physical therapist who is not educated on Ehlers Danlos, that can happen, and I see that happen a lot to people. And I also wasn't diagnosed with Ehlers Danlos yet at the time. Literally none of my doctors knew that it existed, and to this day some of my doctors now apologize because of that. I then started working with a physical therapist who used to be the physical therapist for a lot of Broadway dancers and New York City Ballet, and she had general hypermobility, which again is not the same as Ehlers Danlos, but she had at least a bit more of an understanding. But we did reach a wall eventually where she just wasn't able to help me enough anymore. So I switched working to someone who has Ehlers Danlos themselves. That's their specialty. It's been amazing. I still struggle, but it has made things so much better, not just with dance, but daily life. Something else I used to do is Kung Fu, and we also did some Tai Chi in those classes. I, again, struggled. I had to have a lot of accommodations for the warm-ups. They would have us run. I, most of the time, couldn't run. I would get too many heart palpitations, difficulty breathing, chest pain, nausea, so I was allowed to walk. And for some of the other warm-ups, there were some times where I just couldn't do something, especially the backwards rolls because of my neck. Overall, though, with the accommodations that I was able to have and also made for myself, I felt like it was quite beneficial for me, and I really miss it, both mentally and physically. I feel like it helped me a lot, not just with that, but again in daily life stuff. However, I unfortunately had to quit. Originally, it was because of, again, the thing with thinking that my toes were broken. The podiatrist told me they were broken. Turns out they were never broken. My joints were just completely out of place. And then once that got better, I got COVID in 2022, and then I got long COVID. And since then, I have not been able to return to martial arts. I also have not been to a dance class in person since then, or even virtually. I have only been able to do things entirely on my own. I have not even been able to complete an entire ballet bar online because there's people such as Catherine Morgan who put up ballet bars online that you can follow along with. I can't finish a full one. That's mostly because of the dysautonomia that was made worse by COVID, and my myalgic encephalomyelitis was made worse. And I also started struggling way more because COVID made my Ehlers Danlos worse, which is a very common issue. And again, this didn't just affect my dance, this affected my daily life. My joints became so unstable that whenever I would open the door to my apartment, my elbow would sublux. I had to completely stop doing dishes, aside from things like forks, spoons, chopsticks, stuff like that. And even then, I struggled because of my dysautonomia, which I already struggled with the dysautonomia prior to that, but it got worse. I hear this all the time with people who have Ehlers Danlos, that COVID made their Ehlers Danlos so much worse, and every infection makes them worse. There's other health issues where this is also true for, and there's people who develop long COVID who never had health issues to begin with, but I'm specifically focusing on Ehlers Danlos for this particular video. It's just so sad because prior to getting COVID, although I, yes, was struggling a lot with my health, I was able to do a lot of things still, such as was in my school's auditioned chamber choir, and after high school, I was a cantor at different churches. That was literally my job. I still play piano, but I haven't been able to anywhere near as much ever since I got COVID because it made my joints worse. So I struggle way more, and I get post-exertion malaise from playing piano. I used to be in school for animation and visual effects, which was entirely online due to COVID, but when they went in person, I wasn't able to go, and I would have had to drop out anyways because I was so bad. I kept passing out from pain because Ehlers Danlos made my pelvic floor dysfunction worse, and I also developed migraines with COVID. My GI issues also got worse, which is part of why I wasn't able to be on a proper schedule, even more than I already was struggling with to begin with, because I never would know when I would feel so terrible. And people always tell me how I have such a high tolerance for nausea, so I have to be pretty bad to not be able to get out of the house if it's due to nausea. And the one that bothers me the most is I was trying to have a career in theatre. I still want to. I still want that. But I had to become mostly housebound in 2023 after I was reinfected with COVID due to my MCAS getting so severe that I started having anaphylaxis literally at least once a day. And I was told by my medical care team that I needed to do something because treatment wasn't working because I react to the majority of medications. And there were too many times where my blood pressure was too high and my pulse was too low. And to this day, I still have doctors questioning how I am still alive. Of course, my other issues got worse with that reinfection too, especially the myalgic encephalomyelitis. But the MCAS is what really limited me. There are a lot of environmental triggers that are super common where I live that are hard to avoid, and that's why I was getting anaphylaxis so much. Things got a little bit better when I found a respirator that cuts things out better, like fireplace smoke, but there are certain things such as people smoking
where it doesn't cut out enough and I can still get anaphylaxis. And certain perfumes also, it can completely cut out, but other perfumes, it's not enough. It depends. I unfortunately cannot find a respirator that fits my face that I also don't react to, that cuts out things properly, because my MCAS is so silly. I react to carbon filters, for example. But the Draeger Explorer was able to help me get out a little bit more, and I was able to find certain places that are a bit safer for me, such as Disneyland and certain areas of Japan, which that's a whole thing I have a video about, and I might make an updated video about Japan. But basically, a lot of my environmental triggers that are the worst for me are not so common in Japan, aside from certain areas. So I was overall way more functional there, aside from certain parts of Tokyo or Kyoto. When I came back, I was immediately worse again, though. Again, I will have a separate video already on that, and if you want me to make an updated one, I will. And now we get on to this year, 2026. I got sick with what wasn't COVID, because my wife and I were testing out negative up to 3 weeks later. And we also tested negative for influenza and RSV. There are other viruses that can cause long-term health issues, though, which is why I keep preaching that it is so important not just to avoid COVID, but other viruses. That being said, COVID can cause damage to your immune system, making you more susceptible to getting other viruses more often, and making it harder to fight those off. And I don't know why, but before I got COVID, I was already immune compromised to begin with. My doctors still don't know the cause of that. Ever since I've been sick in February and March, though, that made most of my health issues worse, aside from some things like my Ehlers Danlos itself didn't get worse, but the comorbidities did. And I still have not completely recovered from that. My wife, who doesn't have Ehlers Danlos but has long COVID and other health issues prior to that, also got worse and has not recovered. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but basically things did get a little bit better with time, and I was really, really trying to make sure I paced. I also increased my Claritin dosage, that helped. But then I tried cromolyn. I've made a lot of videos about this already. Basically, I had the exact opposite effect, where my body decided to destabilize the mast cells instead of stabilize. I got off of the cromolyn. I'm still not well. Then I got bug bites, which I started reacting to ever since I went on cromolyn, which made me worse. And now I barely can eat any foods aside from a couple without getting anaphylaxis. And I got really severe anaphylaxis in May. That may or may not have caused a stroke. I have no idea. My doctors are still trying to figure that out. It's a whole thing. Yeah. Another big thing I wanted to add is that prior to getting COVID, I did need a cane. But after getting COVID, I became an ambulatory wheelchair user. I want to make it clear how lucky I am that I was able to get a custom wheelchair, because I cannot self-propel a normal adult-sized chair, because just a few seconds of that made my joints in my fingers and elbows pop out of place, and the placement for my shoulders, it does not work. I am only 4'7". My insurance covered most of the cost of the wheelchair. Again, I am lucky that I was able to get approved of this, and that my doctor ordered for occupational therapy to do the whole thing, and then occupational therapy approved of it, and then my insurance approved of it, but they had to submit all this documentation of my health issues. A lot of people aren't even able to get through the first step of a doctor approving of them getting a wheelchair, including people who are worse than I am. Even with insurance, my chair cost $3,000, but without insurance, it would have been $10,000. And if I wanted a motor attachment, I would have to wait at least a year for insurance to cover it. Except I can't get in with occupational therapy anymore, because they don't have any room for new patients at all to even be put on their wait list. So I'm still waiting. So whenever I do go out of the house with my wheelchair, my wife is pushing me for the most part. I should also mention the only reason why I got approved for the wheelchair is because of the fact that I need it in home in daily life. If I didn't need it in home in day-to-day life, insurance would not cover it apparently. I am far from the only person who needs a wheelchair from COVID now. Both people who have Ehlers Danlos and even people who had zero health issues at all, including someone that my wife saw at the airport, which my wife works at an airport. And this person was saying how they used to have no health issues. Now they can't even walk at all because of COVID. And they were thanking my wife for still wearing a mask. Which that gets me on to my next point that a lot of organizations unfortunately completely skip over, which is prevention of things getting worse. It is so important because it is possible to help prevent things from getting worse. One of those is preventing getting viruses that can help prevent Ehlers Danlos from continuously getting worse along with the comorbidities. And there's others, by the way, that I am leaving out of this video for time's sake, but I have a longer video already about this. It is a known issue that Ehlers Danlos puts you at a significantly increased risk for long-term issues from COVID. And again, COVID is not the only virus that has messed me up long term. It's just one that seems to mess people up at a higher rate. So I would really like to see more organizations not just acknowledging that COVID can mess things up long term, but also try to focus on how to prevent that. And unfortunately, in my case, I do want to make it obvious that I have not stopped wearing a mask. Unfortunately, all the times that I have gotten sick in the last several years have been from people I live with, because I do not live alone, and now I also receive in-home health care. I'm going to be sharing some of what people have been saying in response to this. Just keep pausing and reading if you want to read all of that. I apologize, this thing has been so long. This was originally intended to be a short form video, but instead it's a long form video. And this is just my own personal lived experience. There are going to be people with Ehlers Danlos who can relate to this, and I know there are people who do. But there's also going to be people who aren't going to relate to this, whether they have a different type of Ehlers Danlos than I do, or even if they have the same type as me, it might present differently. Like, I know there's a lot of people who their Ehlers Danlos didn't really become a problem for them until later on than mine, and there's people who have had issues more than me from a young age. So it completely depends on the individual. And I also wanted to go back to what I was saying earlier about the cheerleaders, because it's been a little bit of time since I started making this video, so I have seen more people make posts and comments about what they think about this, including people who went to the event who have been commenting and posting about this. I have only seen a couple of people out of the many who think that the cheerleaders were even an okay idea. Most people seem to be either upset, angry, feel like it's a slap in the face, disappointed. A lot of people feeling like it just didn't properly fit the rest of the conference, and people saying it felt out of place for people who went to the conference. Again, I didn't go. I can't say. I'm just relaying the information that I have seen from other people. Some people have stated that the cheerleaders didn't really even know what Ehlers Danlos was and that they had to be educated on it, but that the cheerleaders themselves seemed very nice and were very open to being educated. And the general consensus I'm seeing is no hate to the cheerleaders. They themselves are not the problem. But I'm seeing a lot of people saying they should have gotten other athletes who do have Ehlers Danlos and can talk about their own story with that. Or even getting, if you want to have someone more famous, then get like a celebrity or something like that who has Ehlers Danlos, because there are some out there that we know of that exist.
This is the Ehlers Danlos Society's response to this. It was just an Instagram story, so it is now gone, but I'm posting it here for anyone who has not seen it. They posted this a couple days after everything.
Also, very odd thing is under posts talking about this, I keep seeing what seems like some sort of bot comment about taking some sort of anxiety quiz, and I just see all these comments saying the same exact thing word for word. I don't know if it's showing up under other posts about chronic illness. Please let me know, because I only just started seeing this yesterday and it's a little weird. Anyways, I am probably still leaving something out, but this video is long enough as is. So if there is anything else that you would like for me to talk about, either in further depth or something I didn't even talk about in this video, please let me know. Actually, there's one extra thing I wanted to add. If I didn't mention it earlier in the video, I can only speak personal experience on my type of Ehlers Danlos. I'm diagnosed with the hypermobile type. I cannot speak on people's experiences with other types of Ehlers Danlos, and those other types, there's a lot of conversation that has been going on. They need more recognition, and there's probably a lot of people that don't even know that they have other types of Ehlers Danlos because of the lack of access to genetic testing. I am struggling to even access genetic testing, and I live in the San Francisco Bay Area and have access to places like Stanford. So, yeah. If you have made it this far, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a good day, and goodbye.